Like me saying, we're going to the Indianapolis 500, and there's two drivers, and they both got Ferraris, and the cars are just as good. And you got driver A and driver B. Driver B is actually a little bit better than driver A. But driver A gets to start off on lap 450, and driver B starts off on lap 1. And driver B's pit doesn't have enough gas to run 500 laps. And then they say, may the best driver win. Right? Well, that's not fair. So we got to make up for this. So that means that minority and women-owned businesses, we know that minority-owned, and by the way, when Maynard Jackson came in 1974, it was black businesses. And what happened is the whites sued to stop it from being black. The white liberals said, we're going to add the Rainbow Coalition and we're going to bring in all kinds of different races, and we're going to make it white women as well. Well, last I checked, white women were not oppressed. They may think they were, but when they decided they didn't want to be at home anymore and they wanted to be able to vote, they got the right pretty quickly. And they weren't shot, they weren't having dogs sick on them, and they weren't thrown in jail. They weren't dragged over to this country and enslaved for 150 years, right? So the fact is also, when somebody immigrates to America, they're coming here for an opportunity. When they voluntarily immigrate, they came here and got an opportunity. America didn't owe them anything. They owe America. But we were dragged over here. We built this country for free. So America owes us something. Now they don't want to pay for it. So all we're saying is let's give us an affirmative fair chance. So we got to go back to supporting black businesses. And so what my private company does is out of our $8 billion of projects, I tell my staff, you will not work here if you can't get at least 35% of our contracts to go to black businesses. And when I say women-owned businesses, I mean black women-owned businesses like my mother. So far too often, people like us get into a position of success and power. And then they say, I got mine, and I don't want to risk it. So we cannot do that. We cannot afford to do that. Nothing worse than having an opportunity to make a change and not taking advantage of it and making that change. So what minority and women-owned businesses is all about is getting access to economic opportunity. And that's also the government. The government's the largest contractor in the world. And they've got trillions of dollars of contracts every year. And it used to be with Maynard Jackson and the black mayors of the 70s and 80s that there was a focus of 35% of the contracts to black businesses. We're not there anymore. We got to get back to it.
Hey, Matt, let me just connect the dots on this point and the previous point about working together. So when you look at the data, black developers, minority developers have a much higher propensity to work with other people in the business. So when a black developer is doing a project, we are awarding contracts to black architects, black electrical firms, plumbing firms, painters, masons, you name it, right? And we feed that ecosystem. The whole point here is to keep that money circulating through this black ecosystem to generate our economy that we control and to grow it. Why Don and I push so hard for projects like Affirmation Tower is it's doing exactly what I just said on a scale that's never been done before. But if we can get this project done, we should see projects like Affirmation Tower replicated around the country. We should see in every city, masons, architects, painters, lawyers, accountants, eating off these projects and all being able to feed families and grow their businesses. We have to get our big slice of this pie. I've been at this for a while now, and I think there's a few things I would say. One, think big. Think big. When you look at real estate, the same mechanics, the same deal execution that you use to do a $1 million deal are the same mechanics, the same deal execution you're going to use to do a $100 million or $500 million deal. And Don just broke down for you the math and the numbers and how we capitalize projects from debt to limited partner capital to GP capital. So you see, getting that access to capital is super important. If you can get that access to capital and access to economic opportunity, think big. There's no calculus, there's no rocket science in real estate. There's a lot of grinding, a lot of pushing, a lot of ambition, but just like the brother who introduced us, you know, you're gonna go through those tough times, but bet on yourself, all right?
Bet on yourself. Don.
I guess the good news is that I have a son who's 28, so I'm making up for my mistakes, making sure he doesn't make them the same ones. But I would say, I mean, I've been very fortunate, and so I have, you know, been able to build our company, and I've made, you know, I would say everybody makes mistakes in business. Everybody would like to make an adjustment here and there, but ultimately, the one thing that would be the major thing that I would not do if I could do it all over again is I wouldn't sell anything.
Oh, for the long term.
Yeah, now, so as Craig mentioned, the real estate is a highly capital intensive business. So, and it's a long-term investment. So it takes 5 years, 10 years for a building to stabilize. And if you build something, it's going to take a number of years to do that. So your capital is locked up. And if you finance it with private equity and the like, you'll have to sell to pay down the private equity, or if you're fortunate enough, you can refinance and pay them off. But because capital wasn't free-flowing to my company, and to me, and anybody like me, and I didn't really understand it as much when I got started, I used my own money to grow my business, but in order to make the money, I had to build an asset and sell it. So I'd have to give 3, 4, 5 years of my life, blood, sweat, and tears, getting one of these buildings built, and then sell it. And so an example is I sold the Royal Palm in 2005. It cost me $80 million to build it. I sold it for $130 million. I felt real good. I made $50 million. And that was in 2005. In 2015, I tried to buy it back for just under $300 million. So the lesson is not to sell. But in order to get there, we gotta solve the access to capital. Because the white guys and the person Craig was giving the example of, and the family there, they don't have to sell because they're working with each other and doing business with each other. We gotta do business with each other. And what I hate the most is to see a black banker, a black senior person over at a private equity firm, but not being, or working in the government, in the treasurer's office or controller's office or pension fund, and being afraid to invest and support us. We have no use for people like that. They should just get out and leave and make way for other people. And that would be my biggest regret, and that is one of the reasons why I am fighting with all I got to change that. And I'm trying to do that for my family, my son, my daughter, and my grandkids one day, but I'm also trying to do it for you. You all to help us do this, because with access to capital, this room would be full of millionaires, centimillionaires, and several billionaires. So that would be my biggest regret, is selling. So if I did it all over again, I would sell nothing.
Put everything
To it, and it formed how I think, because I saw what she had to deal with every day. And so I made a commitment to myself that I would change it. My mother was focused on exposing me. So at 14 years old, she made me volunteer for a city council member's campaign for Washington, D.C. when D.C. got the right to vote in 1974. And that guy ended up becoming mayor of Washington 4 years later. She also got me on Capitol Hill, where I was a page on Capitol Hill, where you go to school at 6 in the morning until 10:30 on the top floor of the Library of Congress, and and then go across the street to the Capitol and work in the House of Representatives. And so I did that for 2 years. So while I was there was a guy who would keep coming. I was an intern my last year for Ron Dellums of California and John Conyers. And so there was this one guy who kept coming into the office constantly. A young brother, was pretty cool. It was Bob Johnson. And so I became friendly. I was low on the totem pole, so I was sitting out in the front desk. I became friendly with him and would, ask him about it. He had just started BET. And so after I, graduated high school, went to New Jersey for a year and came back to DC, I got much more involved in politics. So the mayor at that time was Marion Barry. And by the way, just remember, when I mention Marion Barry, a lot of people will laugh, a lot of people listen. Marion Barry was mayor of DC and made it the mecca of economic empowerment for Black people. And let's not fool ourselves. Marion Barry was embarrassed by the FBI because they videotaped him and set him up to do it. Now, he wasn't the first of us to suffer that. The FBI went after Malcolm X. The FBI went after John Kennedy. The FBI went after Martin Luther King, tried to disrupt his marriage, probably helped get him killed. So the government's been an impediment for us. But getting back to how I came back to DC, Marion was mayor, and one of the biggest fights at that time was a cable television franchise for Washington, DC. And all these companies were trying to get the nation's capital's cable system. Marion Barry awarded it to Bob Johnson. And Bob Johnson had the cable television franchise for Washington, D.C. And he was a cable television industry lobbyist. And BET was kind of his part-time thing, and then he started building BET. But it was the economic engine of the cable television franchise for DC that got BET going. And so Bob was a friend of mine and is a friend of mine for all those years, helped inspire me to show me what all could be done. Because what Bob did is he thought big. As Craig talked about, he thought very big. Took it the first black company to be on the New York Stock Exchange, and then he bought it back and made several $1 billion in the process. And first black NBA team owner with the Charlotte Bobcats. I mean, so he and others like him showed me the way, and we can all learn from them. And we can all learn. And Bob, so think about it. Bob Johnson, the first black billionaire, first black cable television network, first black NBA team, first black cable television franchisee, and he got his start from politics. So that tells us where we need to play.